Hello friends, welcome to the studio of NRC for Education, Central University of South Bihar. I am Rinki from School of Education, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya. In the previous video tutorial on preparing rubrics, we have already learnt about the basic concepts of rubric and types of rubrics. In this session, we will talk about the construction of rubrics. Here we will discuss the different stages to be followed for creating a rubric. To start with, let us now deal with stage-wise construction of rubric. There are 5 basic stages involved in designing and constructing a rubric. Stage 1 is reflecting, stage 2 is development of learning objectives and highest level of performance, stage 3 is grouping and labeling for creating criteria, stage 4 is selection of scale levels, and stage 5 is development of descriptions for each criterion under various scale levels. The first stage in the direction of constructing a rubric is reflecting. In this stage, you need to devote time to reflect on the overall course objectives, the need and purpose for designing the assignment, learners' prior knowledge, your previous experiences related to the similar assignment, your expectations from the learners, the skills which need to be developed by the learners to complete the assignment, etc. In this context, Stevens and Levy has specified 8 specific questions, answering which can make the reflective process easier and authentic. According to them, the first question which you should encounter is, why did you create this assignment? While answering this question, you need to think about the main purpose of designing the assignment. The purpose may be to motivate the learners to gain as much as content knowledge as possible, or to facilitate learning skills like critical thinking or reasoning ability, or to engage learners in some kind of experiential learning, for instance, engaging them in lab work, workshop, etc. The second question which you need to focus on is, have you given this assignment or a similar assignment before? If the answer is yes, then you have to think over the questions asked by the learners before and after completion of that assignment. You also need to think whether the overall results for you were satisfactory or not. Recall some significant satisfactory as well as disappointing results. Now think if any changes can be made to the assignment to increase the probability to obtain the same satisfactory results and avoiding the undesired results. The third question is, how does this assignment relate to the rest of what you are teaching? Here you have to think that how this assignment is related to the other assignments and how successful completion of this assignment can provide base for the future assignment. You also need to think that to what extent it is important to the learners' scholarly lives and the particular discipline. The fourth question is, what skills will students need to possess or develop to successfully complete this assignment? After identifying these skills, you should think that, do learners already have such skills and required to improve them further, or do they need to start from scratch? Are one or more of these skills of greater importance than others? Think if you want to do anything about their skill level. The fifth question is, what exactly is the task assigned? Can this task or assignment be broken down into variety of different component tasks? Are one or more of these component tasks of greater importance than others? How the breakdown and nature of these component tasks can be explained to the learners. The sixth question is, what evidence can be provided by the students in order to show that they have accomplished what you expected them to accomplish when you created the assignment? So, you have to identify the possible evidences that might be used by the learners to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. The seventh question is, what are the highest expectations you have for student performance on this assignment overall? While answering this question, you need to reflect on the constituents or components of an exemplary performance. The eighth and the last question for reflection is, what is the worst fulfillment of the assignment you can imagine? Here you need to think the specific areas or part of the task in which students could not perform well on similar assignment in the past. Now you reflect on the way you can help your students to overcome those limitations. It is better to write down the answers of the above stated questions. Answers of these questions will help you in deciding which type of rubric could best be used for serving the purpose for which assignment is designed. Moreover, these will assist you in deciding whether you need to construct a new rubric or the previously developed rubrics could be used with certain adaptations or modifications. These answers will also generate ideas which surely facilitate construction of a high quality rubrics. After completion of stage 1, we need to focus on stage 2, which is related to the development of learning objectives and level of performance. In this stage, there are 2 steps. The first one is writing specific learning objectives and the second one is writing highest level of performance for the objectives. In step 1, that is writing specific learning objectives, you need to articulate the specific learning objectives which you expect your students to accomplish through this assignment. In this endeavor, the answers of the question number 4, 5 and 6 from stage 1 will guide you. That is, what skills will students need to have or develop to successfully complete this assignment? What exactly is the task assigned? And what evidence can be provided by the students in order to show that they have accomplished what you expected them to accomplish when you created this assignment? In this way, the initial list of specific learning objectives will be ready and then you should refine and reorganize the list after reviewing and discussing with your colleagues. Now, let us understand this stage and the subsequent stages with the help of an example in which we will develop a rubric for oral presentation. For this, we have chosen an assignment for the learners whose task description is stated as: each student will prepare a 30 minutes presentation on the issues and challenges of higher education system in India. The presentation should include appropriate photographs, graphs and other visual aids for the audience. In the first step, we will write the learning objectives for the above designed task. For this task, the learning objectives can be to develop public speaking skill, learn to build logical arguments, learn to organize, compile and use data in systematic manner, learn to compile relevant and accurate evidence to support all the points, learn to identify major dimensions of the theme, and learn to utilize the media or audiovisual aids appropriately. In step 2, we will write the highest level of performance for these objectives. After listing the learning objectives, the description of the highest level of performance which is expected for each learning goal should be written. In this step, the answer of question number 7 from the previous stage will guide us. Let us revisit the question. It was, what are the highest expectations you have for student performance on this assignment overall? I have tried to compile the highest level of performance which the learner is expected to show during his or her presentation for the task assigned. So, while demonstrating, the speaker is expected to catch and keep the attention of the audience completely, maintain eye contact with the audience continuously, maintain expressive and appropriate body language continuously, speak clearly at right speed with appropriately loud volume and modulated voice, respond to the verbal and non-verbal signals sent by the audience appropriately and can adjust the presentation style accordingly, organize the whole presentation systematically and cohesively, in which all the sections are well connected to each other. Present information in each section in a logical manner and easy to follow sequence. Connect closer of the presentation with the introduction. Present argument on the sound rationale. Identify major dimensions of the theme and incorporate them comprehensively. Use accurate, appropriate and detailed facts, instances and examples. Develop unambiguously appropriate and contextual points of discussions, analysis and conclusions. He or she is able to link these with the examples and facts utilized in the presentation. Make visually attractive and readable slides with use of relevant graphics which are supportive to the content. So, these were the highest level of expectations from the learners. Now, we will decide that which kind of rubric we want to make. Here we will develop the analytic rubric, for which we will move forward to stage 3. Stage 3 is grouping and labeling for creating criteria. In this stage, the similar performance expectations are grouped together and labels are created for each group. For this, we need to start with the final list of highest performance expectations generated in the previous step. After this, we read the list carefully and begin to group together similar items. Now, let us understand this by making different groups of the highest level of performance expectations which are displayed on your screen. Here, we may distribute these 6 performance expectations into 3 groups. The expectation that the presenter can catch and keep the attention of the audience completely and throughout the presentation may be kept under group 1. The performance expectations that the presenter can maintain expressive and appropriate body language continuously and the presenter can speak clearly at right speed with appropriately loud volume and modulated voice may be kept under group 2. The performance expectations that the slides are visually attractive and readable and the slides are supportive to the content may be kept under group 3. Grouping together the similar tasks is inevitably a back and forth process where we keep on revising our ideas. Sometimes we may find that some performance expectations do not neatly fit in one group. In this case, we may create an entirely new group of these related items or performance expectations. When the performance descriptions are in groups of similar skills, we need to create labels for these groups. In our case, the groups which we have just created may be labeled as audience engagement, non-verbal communication and use of media. These labels will finally become our criteria or dimensions. Finally, at the end of this stage, we find that the performance expectations are now grouped with distinct labels. In our case of rubric for oral presentation, we have distributed the highest levels of performance statements into 6 groups of similar tasks and labeled them as audience engagement, non-verbal communication, audience awareness, organization, content and use of media. The detail of the arrangement of performance descriptions into various groups is provided in the tabular form as text for your reference. If you see that carefully, you will find that the performance expectations for the objective develop public speaking skills are spread through the 4 criteria or dimensions, that is the audience engagement, non-verbal communication, audience awareness and use of media. Though the need for utilizing media for the presentation also found their way to organization category, but it was considered sufficiently significant to make a new group with a new label named use of media. Similarly, the expectations to develop unambiguously appropriate and contextual points of discussion, analysis and conclusions might also have gone into organization category. But in the end, weighing all the considerations, it was kept under the category content. In this way, the various criteria are developed for the rubric for oral presentation. After creating the criteria or dimension, in the next stage, we select the scale levels for the rubrics, which indicates how well or poorly the task has been performed. These scale levels usually are written at the top of each column of the grid of an analytic rubric as shown on the screen. So, the first task we need to do is to decide on the number of the scale levels. That is, to decide that how many levels there should be. The decision should be based on a very simple principle, that is, select as many as which you can distinctly describe in terms of meaningful differences in performance quality. Hence, for a very simple task, it may be 2 levels and termed as accomplished and redo, or proficient and not yet. However, rubrics with 3 to 5 performance levels are more prevalent. Going beyond 5 scale levels usually becomes more difficult, as differentiating between the performances for each level and articulating them precisely becomes more challenging. Many academicians suggest to use even numbers of scale levels in order to avoid the tendency to rate at the middle level. A second aspect which needs to be focused on is to provide the term to each level. You can see some of the commonly used labels for a 4 scale level rubric: advanced, proficient, basic, below basic; exemplary, proficient, marginal, unacceptable; expert, proficient, apprentice, novice; outstanding, admirable, average, inadequate; exemplary, proficient, adequate, inadequate; exemplary, accomplished, developing, beginning; accomplished, average, developing, beginning; mastery, partial mastery, progressing, emerging. For the rubric for oral presentation, we have selected the 4 scale levels, and these are termed as exemplary, competent, marginal and unacceptable. Now, the criteria which we have decided should be inserted in the vertical side of the grid and the scale levels on the top panel of each column. After this stage, we move to stage 5, where we need to develop descriptions of performance quality for each level of each criterion or dimensions. Here we can begin with the top category, that is the highest level of performances, which we have already created and grouped under each criterion or dimension. In our case, the highest scale level is exemplary, and we have already written these descriptions for each criterion, which now will be placed in the respective boxes in the grid. In the next step, we can write the descriptions for the lowest level of performance for each category. In this task, question number 8, which was discussed in the stage 1, can guide us. That is, what is the worst fulfillment of the assignment you can imagine? While keeping the answers of the question number 8 under consideration, descriptions for the lowest or bottom level are framed. Framing descriptions for the lowest level often is almost negation of the exemplary task description. Let us understand this by writing the task description for bottom level for the criterion non-verbal communication in our rubric for oral presentation. Let us revisit our scale levels. The highest scale level in our case is exemplary and the bottom scale level is unacceptable. The task description for the criterion non-verbal communication under exemplary is: the presenter maintained eye contact with the audience continuously. The task description for the unacceptable can be written as: the presenter could not maintain the eye contact with the audience. In the same way, the task descriptions for the scale level unacceptable are written for our rubric for oral presentation and placed in the respective boxes of the grid. After this, we need to complete this grid by writing descriptions of remaining levels and arranging them at appropriate places in the matrix. While writing the descriptions for various levels, we should remember that we don't need to write completely different descriptions for different levels, but have to describe a continuum of levels of performance quality which should be distinguishable. In our case too, the descriptions for each level for each criterion are developed one by one and added in the grid or matrix, after which it looks like the figure shown on the screen. So, in order to understand how the task descriptions under the various levels are in continuum, let us see the task description under the various levels for the criterion audience awareness. Here, for the criteria audience awareness for the scale level exemplary, the description is the presenter could respond to the verbal and non-verbal signals sent by the audience appropriately and can adjust the presentation style accordingly. For the next scale level, that is competent, description is presenter could respond to the verbal and non-verbal signals sent by the audience on regular basis, but stick to the already prepared story. The description for the scale level marginal is presenter could respond to the verbal and non-verbal signals sent by the audience, but could not answer their questions. And for the bottom scale level, that is unacceptable, the description is presenter could not respond to the verbal and non-verbal signals sent by the audience at all. After going through these task descriptions, it is clear that these are not completely different for different scale levels, but these are described in a continuum of distinguishable level of performance quality. Similarly, if you see the descriptions carefully for various scale levels under each criterion, you will note that all of them are in continuum. You may go through the finally developed rubric for oral presentation in order to observe it minutely. The rubric is provided as the supplementary text for your reference. After preparing the rubric, we may take the advice and feedback of the colleagues and learners and then modify and refine the rubrics accordingly. It helps a lot in refining the descriptions and improving the effectiveness of the rubric. Apart from this, there is another notable aspect that in this rubric we can add boxes beside each segment of the task description to put check mark. So, if the user finds different subcomponents of the task description appropriate for more than one scale levels under the same criteria, he or she gets flexibility to mark at more than one place. In this way, he gets more flexibility to give detailed and accurate feedback. For instance, if user finds one description appropriate under exemplary level and other description under marginal level for the criterion non-verbal communication, he or she can put a check mark at two places to give accurate feedback to the learner. Lastly, I would suggest you that sometimes you should involve learners in the process of development of rubrics. It will help you to make your learners more autonomous and make them ready to take the responsibility of their own learning and assessment. So friends, in this session we have learnt in detail about the 5 stages of construction of a rubric, that is reflecting, development of learning objectives and highest level of performance, grouping and labeling, selection of scale levels and development of descriptions for each criterion under various scale levels. The reference is displayed on your screen. I hope that the lesson would be beneficial for you and help you in the development of effective rubrics. Good wishes for the course. Thank you.